If you went to one of Gigi Allen's shows, you'd actually be risking your health. You'd either have literal shit thrown at your face, get bashed with a mic stand, get raped, get pounced on if he finds you attractive, no matter the age, gender, or species.
I might grab a girl and force her to perform oral sex with me. I've had sex on stage with men, women, and animals.
Despite all of this, he for some reason died a legend. Today I'm going to tell you the story of one of the most disturbing people in music history, and it all stems from a disturbing household. You can tell something isn't right from the moment Gigi Allen was born, because his birth name is Jesus Christ Allen. He was given this name because his father told his wife that Jesus Christ had visited him and told him that his newborn son would be the great man in the vein of the Messiah. Gigi's older brother Merle wasn't able to pronounce Jesus properly and instead called him Gigi, which carried on through his entire life. Allen's family lived in a log cabin with no running water.
We had no shower, no bathtub. Off the kitchen, there's one small room with a toilet. We had no running water. We had to go to wells and bring big jugs of water.
His father was an abusive religious fanatic that threatened to kill his family. And according to Gigi, he wanted to kill his family in a murder-suicide.
Can you tell me a little bit about your father? Well, he told my mother one day that he wanted to commit suicide with her and then kill the two kids and then commit suicide. And she kind of blew it off. And then one day he was down cellar digging and he came up and she said, well, what are you doing down there? And he told her to come down and see, and he had 4 graves dug in the cellar.
He went so far that he dug 4 graves in their cellar. He told Gigi's mother that he was going to fill up the graves in the near future. His father allowed very little contact with others, causing Gigi and Merle to never have any friends growing up. In Gigi's words, they lived in a primitive existence. They were more like prisoners than a family. Only a few minutes in, we can see that this is not a good household. Growing up with abusive parents will obviously impact you negatively. In this case, it's Gigi's father. Common impacts are things like depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, eating disorders, and the one I think Gigi Allen got caught up with was anger. And you'll see why I say this soon enough. After some time, Gigi's mom was over the abuse. Her last straw was when his father forced himself on top of her and raped her. So she divorced the father and changed Gigi's name from Jesus Christ Allen to Kevin Michael Allen. But things were still tough for Gigi because he was placed in special ed classes and experienced other kids bullying him. And I'm sure it didn't help that Gigi started going to school cross-dressed at some point, which was definitely a strange thing to do if you were a high school student in the 70s. Gigi was inspired by the New York Dolls. He didn't care. What he did care about was music.
We basically were living music 24/7. Everything involved in our life was about music. We would go to department stores and steal records. We would break into cars. We'd break into like summer houses to get whatever we could do to sell stuff to buy music. We hitchhiked up to Montreal a lot to see shows. We saw the original Alice Cooper band in '72. We saw the Ziggy Stardust tour, Grand Funk Railroad, Led Zeppelin, Kiss.
I think it's important to note a few things before going on with this story. First off, not being able to socialize when you're a child, that alone will f you up. He's not learning how to talk to people, be with people. He doesn't know how to have friends. His father created that barrier for him and his brother, and then when he finally has that opportunity to make friends, it doesn't work out. So at this point, Gigi was a social mess. After graduating high school, the story goes pretty much how every other musician's story goes. He started off with a cover band with his brother Merle, but then he gets into the Jabbers. Gigi Allen released some music with this band, and in hindsight, this was the calming before the storm, because he went from sounding like this to this. But how did this happen? How did he transition from a seemingly serious project that sounds like it has potential to get like this mainstream audience to niching down and having a scarier aesthetic with song names like Thy Father, Thy Mother, I Kill Everything I Fuck, My Sadistic Killing Spree, and Legalized Murder? What happened? Well, after being with the Jabbers for some time, they were kind of forced to break up. Tension within the Jabbers started mounting because Gigi started acting uncontrollable and uncompromising and vicious. The Jabbers broke up in the spring of 1984. From there, Gigi fronted a bunch of bands like the Scumfucks, the Texas Nazis, and the Cedar Street Sluts. Doing this made him pretty well known in the underground hardcore scene, and it came to a point where it didn't matter what band Gigi was in, all that mattered is where Gigi would be. And things were only about to get bigger after the first time he shot himself on stage. But before that story, we have to talk about his problem with alcohol and drugs. By the mid to late 80s, he was an addict, addicted to alcohol and took any drug that was provided to him. His first time doing drugs was in high school.
I was trying to goad him into doing something like that, but never succeeded. And his brother finally stuck it. I hit acid and one of those munchies, and he did some strange things that night. Tear up an apartment, take all his clothes off, kick the walls in, just went nuts. We tried to calm him down, and he was pissed at his brother. He was gonna try to kill his brother Merle.
By this point, it feels like we're brewing up an experiment, like a fucking homunculus, and trying to create the world's biggest nut job. Gigi already has anger issues and he's always alone, and now we're incorporating drugs and drinking.
1985, in Peoria, Illinois, a guy named Bloody Mess, who was a fan and also had his own band, invited Gigi out for a show, and that was the first time that he had defecated on stage.
After he shot himself on stage, complete chaos broke out. All of the guys that ran the venue went fucking nuts, so Gigi decided to cover himself in the feces. That way no one can touch him or kick his ass, as if it's like a force field around him. And I guess it worked, because what they started doing was just picking up the PA system and the guitar amps and started throwing it out of the venue. There was a few hundred kids at this show, and they all started flipping out, running out of the door because the smell was just so bad. I guess Gigi liked the results, because after this incident, hitting himself was just a regular part of his set. Keep in mind, by this point he's already like spiraling downwards. We're not at his peak insanity yet, but he is a pretty chaotic guy. He doesn't like rules or laws, and for some reason he's being attracted towards like hate and violence. And while we're at this point, it kind of confuses me, because while researching this video, I found out the same year he shot himself on stage was the year he got a divorce. I'm kind of surprised not many people are mentioning that Gigi had a somewhat normal point in his life, being married from 1978 to 1985. The same years Gigi was active in the Jabbers. I'm assuming the cause of the divorce is probably similar to the breakup with the Jabbers. Again, they said that Alan grew uncontrollable, vicious, and uncompromising. I wouldn't be surprised if those traits carried over to his marriage too, but I can be completely wrong. This is just a guess. Now we're making our way towards the darkest point of his life, and this is probably the best time to drop some heavy news. In the mid-1980s, Alan became involved with a teenage girl from Garland, Texas. Her name was Tracy Deneau. She became pregnant, and their daughter, Nico Ann Deneau, was born on March 13th, 1986. I can't find any information on her, so I can't tell you the exact age difference between Gigi and Tracy, but what we do know is Gigi would be 29 at this time. And if the wiki is stating that she was a teenager, I guess we can say best case scenario she was 17, which is still pretty fucking vile. I'm not sure where the ladies are today, but I do know that their daughter Nico wanted to distance herself from the family. There are rumors going around that she changed her name. I don't know.
If it wasn't for what I do on stage, I would probably be a mass murderer. I know I'd kill somebody, because I have such a fierce, intense fire burning inside of me that just was so much that just wants to explode.
Getting back on track, Alan was fascinated with serial killers. He wrote to and visited John Wayne Gacy in prison a few times. If you don't know who he is, Gacy was an American serial killer and sex offender who raped, tortured, and murdered at least 33 young men and boys, all while having a day job as a clown. It looks like Gacy and Allen had a good relationship.
And Gigi had actually gone to visit him. I went to visit Gacy one summer, like about a week after Gigi had been there. And Gacy said to me, he goes, "That Gigi, man, great kid. I like that guy a lot. Love him like a brother. But man, if he doesn't stink like the worst, pissiest ass wino I've ever met in my life."
The killer even painted a portrait of Allen and had these words to say about him. Gigi Allen is an entertainer with a message to a sick society. He makes us look at it for what we really are. The human is just another animal who is able to speak out freely, to express himself clearly. Make no mistake about it. Behind what he does is a brain. By this point, Allen shows destroyed venues and sound equipment, and he can never go through a full set because either the venue owners or the police would stop the set after a few songs. His constant touring was only stopped by jail time or by long hospital stays for broken bones, blood poisoning, and other physical trauma. And as the years go by, he pretty much only plays shows naked. He would shit on stage, eat the feces, throw it at the crowd. He would fight people in the crowd for no reason, rape or sexually assault people in their crowd by either forcing himself on top of them or forcing them to give him oral sex. He would bash his head with the mic and bleed all over the venue, and even smash glass on the floor and roll around in it. Allen also mentions that he's gonna kill himself on stage Halloween night of 1989.
And the ultimate performance would be when I have reached my peak. I'll commit suicide, but I'll take your kids with me.
What does that mean? You'll take our kids
It means
with you?
whatever I just said, I'll take them with me.
Well, what's it mean? Doesn't make any sense.
Them too, if I have to. Or they may kill themselves. When you reach your peak, it's time to die.
Allen states that his suicide is a sacrifice for rock and roll. He said if he kills himself at his peak while he's at his strongest, his soul would be stronger versus dying naturally.
I got this wild soul that wants to get out of this life. It's too confined in this life, and I think that to take yourself out at your peak, if you can die at your peak, your strongest point, then your soul will be that much stronger in the next existence.
He also feels like his soul would be as free as it can get, like more free than what he's doing now, which is hopping on a van and touring the country, doing whatever he wants. But when the due date came to kill himself, it didn't happen because he was in jail. But what was he jailed for? This is when questions arise and things get really interesting. 1989, Allen was arrested and charged with assault with intent to do great bodily harm less than murder of a female acquaintance. Allen initially denied the charges, claiming that the woman was willingly participating in their sexual activities. He admitted to cutting her, burning her, and drinking her blood, but insisted that she did the same thing to him. Allen mentioned how there were inconsistencies in the girl's story, and the judge agreed, giving him only 2 years in prison from 1989 to 1991. But here's my question. Is Gigi Allen a character, or is this really him? As stated earlier, he had a normal life at some point, and while he was in prison, his counselor came out and said a bunch of interesting things. In short, his counselor was just saying how Gigi Allen was just a character. He was an image made up by Kevin, the man behind Gigi Allen, because he wanted to be successful, but he didn't have the musical talent it took to become successful. So if he doesn't have the talent, he has to put on the show. His counselor believes if his father never existed, neither would Gigi Allen. Only Kevin, again, the guy behind Gigi Allen, and he thinks he could have been a sweet guy. But he does acknowledge that in order to put on this Gigi Allen character, you have to have something f***ed up with you. Whether Gigi Allen is a character or not, it doesn't negate all the f***ed up things he did. Being violent, a pedophile, a rapist, an addict, an asshole, there's still a ton of damage there. And now, things are about to change, because after he leaves prison, he not only goes down the darker path, but it's all documented thanks to Todd Phillips. He was the writer and director for movies like Hangover 2 and 3, 2019 Joker, involved with the movie Borat and Hangover 1, but his first project was documenting the final chapter of Allen's life, from leaving prison to the day we lose him. Here we discover after Gigi's release from prison, he skipped parole to hop on tour. And now we get a closer look at the band. On bass we have Merle, Gigi's older brother. Merle seems like he's just there for the ride. He's not a nut like his brother or the drummer of the band, who we'll get to in a second. He just enjoys being on the road and doing whatever he wants. And you can tell by watching this documentary, he really does love his brother. He doesn't outright say it, but it shows. He has patience, they have a bond, and it feels like he's Gigi's biggest supporter. He stated that he tried to calm Gigi down at some point, but whenever Gigi has his mind set on something, it's impossible to change it, which is very reminiscent of their father.
If you know Gigi the way I do, you can't talk Gigi out of doing anything that he wants to do.
Then you have Dino Sex on drums. He seems like he's not all there, like spacing out easily while talking to him. He thinks he's immortal and he plays shows almost exclusively naked, and he has been locked up for exposing himself to a little girl. When asked about it, he says he was just teasing her, which doesn't make the action any less gross. As for guitar players, they can't find a stable one due to the chaotic nature of the band. In this documentary, we do get a lot of uncensored footage of Gigi's shows, and we get a closer look at his life, which can be very dark and disturbing at times, and at other times it's hilarious. But some notable information I gathered was Merrill mentioning how Gigi Allen is like an animal. He'll be okay with you one second, and then the next second he completely turns on you.
He can be normal 1 minute, and he can turn on you like an animal in the next minute, you know?
Gigi hated everyone, and his lifestyle was a complete mess. Like, one example is how minimally Gigi lives, which there's nothing wrong with. It's okay to live minimally, but Gigi's reasoning is what makes it crazy.
Pretty much everything I own will fit in like a paper bag, and to me it seems like it's the only way to live if you got it. You know, I'm the type of person who always has to get out of town quick.
He says it makes it easier to flee the state when the police are after them, which is pretty often. On Gigi's birthday, he refused to go to this birthday party that was thrown for him unless they find a girl that is willing to either piss or shit in his mouth. So they did. They found a woman. There's footage that's uncensored showing a lady peeing in Gigi's mouth twice. He then throws up and the vomit is all over him and his face, and before cleaning himself up, he goes for thirds. There were scenes that showed Gigi getting head from a man, and another scene where he's tonguing down another man. Yet he has written songs revealing racism and bigotry. Footage of the tour showed every night was pretty similar. The Gigi Allen experience wasn't just watching a band live. It was watching a zoo animal go ballistic as a band plays behind him. Towards the back end of the documentary, it showed a scene where Gigi and the murder junkies fled the state because during their set, the police showed up. They successfully fled, but then they kind of left Todd in the dark, the guy documenting the whole thing, which I think was for the better, because once they got to San Antonio, Texas, got so bad. 15 show attendees jumped Gigi Allen and broke his arm. He was then taken into police custody and the tour ended. The documentary was released in 1993, the same year that Gigi Allen died. The way Gigi died wasn't like how he hyped it up to be. It wasn't a murder suicide, it wasn't on Halloween, it wasn't that glorious death that he envisioned it to be.
So we booked a show at a place called the Gas Station. That would turn out to be the final show. Well, we ended up playing 3 songs. Show got shut down. The Lower East Side turned out into a riot area. I mean, there were kids in the street. My brother was wandering the street naked, frustrated, wandering around the streets on the Lower East Side with a bunch of junkies, trying to figure out what they were going to do with the rest of their day. Gigi ended up at this kid's house. You know, between the cocaine and the drugs and the alcohol and the heroin, he passed away during the night. Everybody woke up the next morning. My brother's dead. So that was probably one of the worst days of my life, you know. And yeah, it was over.
After the death, the mortician was asked to leave his body exactly how it was, which was rotting and decomposing, and there is footage of this in the documentary. Allen's bloated corpse was dressed in his black leather jacket and trademark jockstrap and his funeral became a low-level party. And his grave was always vandalized by his fans. There was always piss on it and shit and cigarette butts and like alcohol, which his mom and brother obviously didn't like. His tombstone was removed in 2010 after it was knocked off by its base by a fan, and a local church took it and refused to give it back. I don't even know how that's legal, but whatever. Anything Gigi Allen did back then would not fly today. I feel like people would be so quick to call him out on his bull, but knowing Gigi, it'd probably encourage him to do it more. It seems like he just really enjoyed the shock factor. He didn't care about anyone or anything. He just did whatever he felt like doing. He just loved the chaos and being known as that lunatic that everyone should stay away from. I think if he really wanted to, he could have been normal, but his attraction to this violence just didn't let him. The similarities between him and his father were there. Controlling, violent, antisocial, the murder-suicide thing. He became the man he hated, but to extreme levels. I just don't think he knew or realized it. Now click right here. This is an hour of hated musician stories you could watch or listen to in your background.